care considerations through the holidays. And these are our 4 objectives. How would I know if someone is going through grief or loss? What could it look like? How can I create connections that help people feel understood and heard? What warning signs should I be aware of that might indicate someone is at risk of being severely depressed and or suicidal? And we will close with, how would I know someone needs a referral to see a professional, right? And what are our care resources and how do I suggest them in a non-offensive way? So this is a very practical session for you all. And you can refer back to the recording after this one too, which probably will be uploaded earlier next month. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Mi-jin Park, who will go through that first objective.
Why is not always joyous for everyone during holidays? But even if we are not adding during the holidays, joyfulness is not always is in our lives every day, right? But especially during the holiday, there is more issues that are surfacing it and also increasing it more with all other issues that we all are going through every day. The very first area, probably you already know, even you are typing ChatGPT, all this information will come out. But today we are together, wanted to really talk about and aware that this is the reality of our congregation and also believers. So first area that I wanted to talk about is the financial stress. We all probably agree that this is one of the cause of why we cannot be joyful. We're going shopping for gifts and vacation plan and all that, but why inside of our heart that we are not joyous and then joyful? Is it because, especially in America, is more of a capitalism, is the fundamental foundation of our culture and a social expectation, which means more you buy, make you feel good. More you have, make you feel good. It almost is a reflex of who you are, right? Even if when you are giving your credit card to the cashier, sometimes, oh, I'm buying this, internally I'm not saying much, but sometimes it makes you feel good. But it is really hard for us to escape the feeling that holiday often means spending more money than a usual time. Again, looking at other people are buying gifts, going vacations, and doing so many other things. But when we're looking at a social media too, is we're comparing during this time. And also some family members who have many children and extended families. But often during the holidays, we needed to buy some more expensive gifts, more than a meaningful gifts. This is a time that maybe is rather than spending money for the gift, but understanding each other's love language so that we can help each other's how they can feel more loved, right? So because of this reason that it increased the anxiety. Everywhere they go, how can I manage my money or my bank account? How can I pay for my next mortgage and then all that, right? And then we're adding on top of all these things. You are not alone on this stress and anxiety. According to the statistic, 2/3 of Americans said they feel stressed about money during holidays. Average per person spending ranging from approximately $890 to $1,500 per person. Per person. So how many family members that you have? Calculated. Sometimes it can go beyond. That's what we can imagine. And also, it's already there. So the family and social issues is another big thing. Especially individualistic culture in America, is nuclear family. But often we came out of the family that didn't have a lot of good memories, have some scars, or some dysfunctional dynamics when we grew up. And holidays is almost you have no choice but to go back to that home and will be triggered. Sometimes some of us or our members who will visit you have abusive relationship, their parents. But again, holiday is almost, rather than being alone, we wanted it to be with others. So we go back to their home and try to kind of push down all those memories and scars, wounds that we have from our family members. And this family dynamics is not only is just our family, sometimes the cultural backgrounds can cause different family dynamics and expectations as well. And also when we are visiting the family, we wish that during this holiday time, we can have a lovey-dovey and joyful and always excited. Mm-hmm. But always one or two family members are very toxic. It's something that we cannot avoid. I don't know why. And always one or some more members to bring some negativity or surfacing the dysfunctional relationship, that pattern that we used to grow up with, and bringing negative memories and pointing at very sensitive topic. People who are single, when you gonna bring your boyfriend and when you gonna get him? What is your job and why you are not doing this, why you are not doing that? When will you gonna have a baby? You know, all that is sensitive topic. Some people are not, that sensitive, right? So those things can trigger and different memories and different reality. I shared this in the other day in seminar. One of my parents came in and sharing with me that so many days that she has to work hard to save money for the children, take their children to Disneyland, and saving all the money because the family is big. It was big, and taking day off to take them to save a little bit of money because during the week is cheaper than going the weekend. So all this, so she was so proud that that's what she did for her kids. And then after that, I brought the child. And then he was telling me, I didn't enjoy that at all. Why? Because mom didn't treat him the food that he wanted it to eat. So all his memory, it was worst Disneyland trip. So different memories that we have of perspectives. Now it grew up, that memory became story of our lives, stories of our childhood. And now it became a sense of who we are. As if I was unloved. I wasn't important. I wasn't good enough. A parent's perspective is completely different. Now, with this different perspective and different memories, we get together and then deep inside, we're shy not to talk about it, but anything can trigger that spot. And often, family get together during the holidays also can trigger unresolved conflicts that we grew up with, unmet expectations from our parents. Many of our church members probably are going through isolation and feeling lonely. They have no place to go, and there's no place where they can feel comforted. Like we talked about it today, and some people may go through grief, loss. And some people are right now going through some physical illness and physical challenges. And they're going through some medical conditions as well. It brings a sadness. There's so many other factors why we cannot be joyful. Because it's right there within us, and then right next to us, these whole things are just surfacing even more and greater way during the holiday season. With these scars and pain, conflicts, something that we don't know, When I enter your church today, what a beautiful building. And everybody's laughing, smiling, giggling, right? And they are talking and having this relationship, but may not be that easy. That some people inside, they have no one can be allowed their vulnerability so that they can be comforted. So then, how can we, what things that we needed to consider when we encounter people, those people who came with all this pain and scars and some challenges in their lives during the holiday? First thing, we have to manage our own expectation correctly. You have to set your own expectations, what you can do, what you cannot do. Of course, we have this heart and compassionate heart that we wanted to help everybody, right? But sometimes with this great intention, we go beyond what we can do. And also we have to set our own boundaries. Setting boundary, this word is a big, and then so many people are using this word, boundary. What does that mean, setting the boundary? And the same thing, that you needed to know your own limitations, right? If it is beyond what you can do, there's resources. Even today, your car got created. If anything that you cannot do, you have to know how to refer. And then Dr. Esther Park later will go over that as well. Another area that we also needed to be aware, that our own self-awareness. We have to be mindful of our own behaviors. The words that we are using can also impact and people around us. It doesn't matter about your intention, but sometimes it doesn't come out correctly. I will give you some statistic, the number. If you're taking notes, write it down. 7, 38, 55. I want you to remember these three numbers, okay? So, for in the communication, social communication, so many people studied about this, only 7% that you will convey and other people receive what you wanted to tell them. Only 7% is a verbal communication. Only 7%. If you say, oh, I love you, the I love you, we're not going to translate it with the entire meaning that how much you love them, because only 7%. But what are other 93%? Is 38 and 55. 38 is your tone of voice. I love you. I love you. I love you. Your tone of voice is 38%. And 55 is your facial expression, your gesture, and your body language. The reason why this 90% is so powerful and then greater than verbal is because it's related to emotional part. 30, your tone of voice, body language, all are emotional meaning that you are translated. So that when you are aware of how you are engaging with the people who are coming to you with their sadness and then some difficulties, that we needed to practice active listening. Rather than you give advice. Sometimes you probably know that too. People don't come to you for advice. They just want to talk. They just want somebody to listen to them. So avoid to give advice. Ask a question, clarifying question. Don't assume that you know them. Don't assume that you understand. We use that word a lot. Oh, I know. And suddenly turn back to, I went through that, blah, 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 and this now is my story, never ending. And then paraphrasing, periodically summarize what they said so that make them feel validated, and do not solve the problem. Your job is not solving the problem. All the life issues that they went through is not a one meeting or two meetings will resolve that. listen actively. Prioritizing positive interactions, what I meant is you have to model. You have to model in front of them, focusing on identifying some positive qualities that they have and positive qualities that maybe their family members have. So another number that is 80-20 rules. 80% focus on the positive. 20% focus on some negative, then how to navigate those issues. I used my old time, but I wanted to conclude. If our team doesn't mind, I will add 1 more minute. But how all these things and issues that we needed to approach with the prayer. The gospel is good news. Again, it is not advice, it is a report that what Jesus has done for us. Think about it. Jesus' very first sermon after his great temptations, he was dealing with poor. He was preaching to the poor. He was binds up the brokenhearted, emotional brokenness. Proclaim the freedom for the captives of their mind. Release from the darkness, the spiritual blindness that they cannot see the truth. But what is the truth? That we also have to remind it and believing in it. Even if we don't say it, we have to pray with this. So I wanted to conclude my portion with Romans chapter 8:28. I will just use, and then if you have time, please go back to read it. As you know, all this chapter probably is said, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Nothing. Troubles, persecutions, famine, nakedness, danger. Any of these cannot separate it, but you are more than a conqueror. And Jesus, what he has done, with his resurrection power, that now no one and nothing on earth and situation, even from our past scar, can be separated us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Amen. I will invite Jen to continue with the today's.
How can I create connections that people feel understood and heard? And so with that, let's talk a little bit about that. I'm assuming, because a lot of you are in ministry, that you already have some connections. So part of as we're talking today is the assumption that you're going to be out on the patio, you're going to be in the bookstore, you're going to be maybe in the cafe, maybe there's encounters that you have with people that you don't know, as well as the people that you're doing ministry or your ministry engages you in with. So, but as we talk about creating connection, helping people feel understood, I think it can apply in both settings. But the talk, as I developed it, was more about maybe a person you're less familiar with. So with that in mind, we'll kind of move forward. So first, I'm assuming, and Dr. Meejan also talked about some of these things already, that there's a lot of you that this is going to sound really familiar, some of the things I'm talking about. I don't know about you, but I love going to weddings. I love going to weddings with my husband because we've been married over 30 years. And it's such a sweet reminder. Like, I know good communication. This is what I do for a living, right? But like, but then you sit in this moment where you see this sweet couple that is just so in love, and they're right at the launch of their, and it's just such a beautiful reminder of the things that you know, but are always good to hear again. So I would just invite you to try and just allow this time to be, if it's familiar, to let it refresh you and encourage you a little bit more. So how do we create connections that help people to feel heard and understood? Well, first, if I can get my thing right, is we demonstrate care by being observant, which maybe sounds really basic, but really it's about asking, okay, what do I see? What do I hear? So what do you see when you connect with someone? You're looking visually. Dr. Mejan already talked about the fact of how powerful nonverbals are, right? So thinking in terms of like, well, what are the things that I see when I look and I engage with somebody? Not everybody is an open book. I'm one of those people where like, you ask me how I am, I'm going to tell you how I am. But there's a lot of people who aren't open books, right? And so we have to pick up on their nonverbals. Are you seeing things like maybe as they begin to tell their story, their eyes well up with tears, right? Or what do you see? Maybe they don't make any eye contact at all. Their gaze is downward. You sense there's maybe shame or embarrassment around what they're saying. So being aware of what you see, even like we talk about in counseling a lot, is we note like when someone comes into our office, what's their appearance? Are they disheveled? Are they, maybe their hair appears to not have been washed in a while? Those are all indicators of something potentially is going on with them. So what do we see? Do you see closed off body language? Do you see resistance? Do you hear tones that just reflect like, yeah, okay, indifference or fear? So those are things that you want to be aware of as you're looking. And then, of course, what do I hear? So what do you hear? That tone of voice that Dr. Mejan was talking about. Do you hear fear? Do you hear anger? Do you hear stress? And that tone of voice really reflects that a lot. So pick up on those nonverbals. Sometimes what they say. So it's verbal. What do you hear? Sometimes it might be something that has sort of a shame base to it or a high level of expectation. Something like, I should have known better. Why can't I get this right? Maybe as blatant as, I'm just so stupid. I've been here before and I've done it again. So listening to what they're saying, sometimes people with their words will minimize too, like, it's not that bad. I've got it figured out, I'll be fine. So the things that they say are also cues for you to just be aware of as you lean in to go, okay, Lord, how am I going to minister to this person based on what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing? And of course, when we're aware of the details of what they say, along with paying attention to their nonverbals, then we're going to be better equipped to respond to them. And so as we respond to them, we want to be sure that they feel like we're interested. So how are we showing that interest? And Dr. Mejan talked a little bit about this, like our nonverbals. I mean, literally what you say, what is that, 7%? Okay, so 7%, sorry, I'm running behind on my slides. 7% is really your words. So again, we talk about what do you say with your nonverbals? What does your tone of voice sound like? A while back, I was at a women's retreat, and I had a friend, and she was sharing the prayer room space with me, and people would come in for prayer. And she reflected to me later on, she goes, it's just so weird, Jennifer, like I noticed like when you were talking with someone, like if they got really soft, you got really soft. And if they were more animated, you were more animated. So even the tone in which you approach someone helps them to engage with you. So just think about that tone piece. Also things like good eye contact, open body posture. If you're sitting like this, as opposed to maybe you're sitting and you're leaning in, then you're indicating I'm interested, go on. I have in my notes, be fully present. Please put cell phones away, which is so hard because I know that we're all on some level like so attached to our phone. Mine's attached to my watch, which makes it even worse, right? Because then my arm is buzzing and I'm like, don't look, stay engaged, don't look. But there is such a temptation in that, right? But can you imagine the minute you glance, you think you're being sneaky and you glance at your phone, and if they see it, what does that say to them about how important they are in that moment? Is there anything that is so epically important that you have to look at your phone in that moment? Probably not. We're just so trained to do it. Like little Pavlovian dogs, right? It's just so sad, but that's another talk. Okay, so we're moving on to the other thing that non-verbally can be really helpful is just that occasional nodding of a head. Because no one wants to talk to a blank screen. I'm listening, but I'm not really showing you anything, right? So we want to have that feedback non-verbally when we're sharing with someone. Dr. Meakin spoke a little bit about the next, which is summarize and empathize. Sometimes people, I mean, how many of you in the room have had an experience where you have someone talking and they're just like rapid fire words? Anybody? Okay, a few of you. And it's sort of like, okay, do I interrupt? How do I summarize when they just talk for 15 minutes straight? You know, as much as possible, look for that moment of a breath and just say, okay, let me just for a second. And you may have to say, can I interrupt you only because I want to make sure I'm tracking with you? You know, this is what I'm hearing so far. So giving back what you're hearing is a great way. You're summarizing in a very succinct way. And again, I think probably most of you understand what summarizing means, but you're summarizing in your own words what the other person is saying. And then the follow-up is empathy. So something like, wow, that sounds really hard. It doesn't have to be, you know, huge amounts, or it seems like you're in a very overwhelming situation. Is that right? So there's an empathy and there's a I'm still tracking, I'm hearing what you're having to say. Next, clarify versus assume. And again, this concept of like, sometimes someone can share an experience that we've had, right? Like I've had a significant loss, and so this person is sharing their significant loss, and so it would be very easy for me to project my whole idea of, well, this is what you must feel like, and I know the pathway to recovery for your loss because I've been through it before. That is assumption. And again, immediately it changes the trajectory, and now I'm making it about me. And I don't think that any of you as care providers are thinking, I want to make it about me. But what can happen is when you start to use yourself and your own story as an example, is you're taking the focus off of them. And again, the topic of this question is how do we demonstrate a care and an interest level? And so we need to be careful about self-disclosure in that way and not making assumptions. And again, as I talked about before, clarifying goes hand in hand with that summary piece, right? Like I'm hearing that. Is this correct? Based on what you're sharing, I'm wondering, am I understanding you correctly? So just clarify every now and again in the conversation. So there's two different types of clarifying questions that I have noted. One is just a simple, straightforward, gathering more information. It might sound something like, you know what, you seem really angry about the situation. Am I understanding that right? Pretty straightforward. Another clarifying might be about gathering more information. So it might sound more like, you inferred that there's been times like that this has happened before. Is that correct? Can you tell me more about some of those other times? So I'm summarizing, I'm clarifying, and then I'm asking for more information. So just different ways of approaching it. Again, not one is right or wrong, it's just different. Okay. So then seeking understanding versus redirecting. And of course, we feel cared for when someone looks to know us better. So questions that help to seek understanding. And I love questions. This is like my favorite topic to talk on, but I don't have very much time. And guess what? You didn't start the timer. Oh, darn. I'll start it now, but I have no idea how much time I have left. Anyway, so the idea, for me, questions is just such a powerful tool, and yet I think we've lost that art, and so the concept of just like, how can I use questions to seek a deeper level of understanding with this person I'm sitting across the table from, or I'm getting to know a little bit better. So you want to ask questions that help with understanding. So if someone's sharing with you, then you want to ask a follow-up question that maybe takes you to a deeper level. So it's like they're talking up here and they mention something, ask a question that gets you just a little deeper and a little deeper. You're going to get more information that way, right? Occasionally, and I'm just going to say this as actually, I'm going to skip that for now. I think it might be less helpful. Seeking understanding. Oops, am I going the wrong way? I am. Wait, no, I'm not. Okay. So how we respond to what they tell us demonstrates our interest level. So nonverbal, summarizing and empathizing, clarifying versus assuming, seeking understanding, and finally we have self-control. And what do I mean by self-control? And again, Dr. Meakin briefly talked a little bit about this idea of self-control, because sometimes It's hard for us when we have a lot of empathy for someone. We want to help them, right? We want to fix their situation. And so I'm saying have self-control. Do not try and fix their situation. Don't try to give advice. The most impactful thing you can do is listen. And then we'll talk a little bit later about if you are going to make a recommendation, that comes after the listening. So have self-control. Don't go for the quick fix. Sometimes what's kind of interesting, and I found, is a lot of times people will ask you, like they almost like bait you, like, well, what would you do? What do you think I should do? And it's like, ooh, I would still hold back. I'm not giving them a lot of answers and just maybe ask another question like, well, what have you done to this point? What do you feel has been most effective? Who are the people in your life that have helped you? So I wouldn't do the quick fix and give them the answer. I'm not saying all the time, but just be careful about that. So that's why I say self-control. Okay, I'm trying to think if I have anything else. Oh, okay, so I'm closing up the section. I want to provide you with just a few example questions. Oops, I don't know why I can't get these arrows right, but this way. Questions that can cultivate safety and show interest. So this is an example. Can you tell me more about the situation? If you are just in a situation like, I don't know what to ask. I can't think of a good question, Jennifer. Oh my gosh, this is the magic question. Tell me more. Tell me more says, I do want to know more. I can't think of a really great question right now, but tell me more is a question. And then it opens up more dialogue. Next. That sounds, and again, you're going to put in your own words. So that sounds hard. That sounds painful. That sounds challenging. Again, we don't want to assume how it feels for them, but if you've listened long enough, you could probably interject this. What's hard about that? What's the hardest thing for you? What's helped you to navigate through this season or this difficulty? So it's a reflection of what you've heard up to this point with a follow-up question. Next, I appreciate your courage to share with me. In what ways can I be of help? And this particular question is really an affirmation, right? It's you're saying, you know what, you're courageous. You've been open and talked about this with me, and I want to affirm that in you. And then, of course, the follow-up of like, how can I help? Now, sometimes people have no idea. Like you can say, how can I help you? And they're so overwhelmed. They have no concept of like even being able to say, I need you to do A, B, C, and D. They're like, I don't know. And so you can offer, if you want, again, this is after listening, maybe a multiple choice question. Do you think it might be helpful for us to do this? Do you think you might appreciate, or this might be of benefit if we talked about this or went this direction? So you can offer maybe a suggestion, but again, it needs to be a light suggestion if they're overwhelmed and they can't come up with something on their own. How are you feeling about all of this? This is if we're care providers, we want to know how people feel. But I would caution you with this particular question, because if you're inviting feelings into the space, then you make sure you have the time to really hear them out and care for those feelings. Because asking someone how they feel and thinking, okay, I'm going to give them a minute to respond to that is probably not going to work great for you. So these are just some examples. They're not like the be-all, end-all, but I want you to kind of hear and think about like, well, what would a good question look like as I'm trying to help someone to feel cared about, feel safe, feel seen. Oops. And with that, I get to invite up Dr. Esther, who's going to help us with our next section.
Thank you.
And I have a feeling you know how to use that clicker way better than me.
All righty, so we're going to, let's review warning signs to be aware of someone who might be clinically depressed. This is not your responsibility to diagnose, but to have a little bit of an idea that somebody may have significant major depressive disorder or suicidality. The depression or major depressive disorder is, good news, is very treatable. We just have to detect it and start treating it. And typically they have a set of symptoms, and these are the these are the criteria that we use, is persisting at least 14 straight days, pretty much all day long, and it impairs their function, impairs their thinking, feeling, behavior, and function. Some people are depressed, but they don't have the obvious signs, but they have a lot of physical symptoms, stomach aches, headaches, sleeplessness, and that might be an indication that they are depressed. Now I'm going to move toward the next section, and I know this is really quick because we're only at halfway our workshop right now, but there are some examples of behaviors and comments that warrant action to intervene the progress toward imminent danger. How can we know that? What are the behaviors and comments that warrant action from our end to intervene the progress toward danger, specifically danger to self? And the three areas we're going to talk about is talk, behavior, and mood. And these are the areas to observe. The first one is about talk. What a person says can be a very important indicator of suicidal ideations. If they start talking about wanting to kill themselves, that's kind of obvious, right? But even things like feeling hopeless, being a burden, having no reason to live, feeling trapped. If you hear these, then be concerned. The next area is behavior, especially when related to big events and losses or change. And a big event is holiday season as well, because sometimes things had happened in previous holiday seasons that will remind them of those huge events. That sometimes is a risk of conjuring up thoughts of not wanting to live anymore. So the behaviors to watch out for example, increased use or misuse of substances and alcohol, looking for ways to end their life, researching online about methods, withdrawing from activities and isolating themselves from family and friends, visiting or calling people to say goodbye, having a little bit of a farewell, acting recklessly, giving away prized possessions, or showing symptoms of the depression, aggression, fatigue, sleep changes, and what have you. That's not usually them. And then the third area is mood, right? And we're talking about that. Depression is the most common related to suicide. And did you know 90% of all completed suicides are directly related to individuals who did not receive treatment at all or inadequate amount of treatment? And we mentioned earlier, suicide is preventable. So you are in a wonderful position to, if you catch and suspect that someone's talk, behavior, and mood may indicate a risk, that you can intervene. And if they receive the treatment, then it wouldn't have gone all the way to feeling suicidal ideation or having ideas how to attempt it. And when we hear that, we automatically, sometimes for me, I automatically assume I think they have the disorder of some sort and to begin intervention. So depression, anxiety, loss of interest, irritability, these all could indicate that someone is at a higher risk of suicide, especially if it's untreated, especially if it's persistent, day in and day out, month after month. Because sometimes you can ask, how long has this been going on? If you're running out of questions, that could be another one too. Right? So in our practice, like I said, we take this so seriously. We really try to engage further. Sometimes we would even cancel the next appointment after us if someone is experiencing this, because we have to get to the bottom of it and interest them into receiving treatment. More on that a little later. So for cardiology and other medical specialties, they have certain conditions that they know they have to reduce the risk in order to reduce the risk of death, right? Cardiologists work on atherosclerosis. They work on reducing the risk of myocardial infarction, which is heart attack, in order to, because that is a very fatal event. It could be very fatal. In psychiatry and psychology, the thing that we try to reduce is the risk of suicide, right? To prevent that. Therefore, that's why we take every single, even minor thoughts of suicidal ideations very seriously, because the minor or mild thoughts even if it looks like attention grabbing, that is serious enough to try to prevent progression to a major thought or a heavy thought, because that will lead to a very severe consequence. So how can I support someone in a crisis right now? Right? They're sitting with you and you're suspecting, what do I do, in a crisis? First of all, don't panic, right? And what you can do is actually just ask, right? Don't be afraid to just outright and ask. Are you feeling like you don't want to live anymore? Some people are afraid to use the S word, right? But so you can use other terms. Do you not want to live anymore? Do you have thoughts that life is not worth going on? And then you can bring it up. Did you ever have thoughts of taking your life and thinking about suicide? Some people think that we shouldn't ask those things because it might give them the idea. But research shows that's not true. Actually, it is a safety factor to bring it out into open explicitly. And of course, like my two colleagues mentioned, facial expression, body language, gestures, what you're showing matters as well. And if they are in danger, if they are saying that, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to live till tomorrow, okay, then don't leave them alone. Right? Don't say, okay, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Right? Okay? And also don't overreact as well. You can say, you know what, I'm going to stay home today, and how about you and I hang out? If you have that kind of time and leisure, can we talk about it? They might say, no, you don't have to. You want to try to engage them a little bit and say, well, can I call you later? And if you're really not sure, then you can ask the next question, which I usually don't bring up in seminars, but this might be helpful for you. If you're not sure, like, well, do I just stick with them even though they told me to go away? Right? Is to ask, will you be safe today? Are you going to do anything today? Do you have any plans? When you go to that level of questioning, they might give you that reassurance. No, I'm thinking about it. I'm not going to do anything. We'll take questions at the end. Can you keep that in mind? Alrighty. The third one is ask them if they want to talk. Asking permission is very, very good because sometimes they don't want to talk to you, right? They can tell you about it, but you can ask them, I can talk with you, or would you like to talk to someone? This is the way to ask them. But if they say sure, then use all of the tips that are provided about active listening and listening in a very patient manner, right? Showing them that this space with you is a safe space and there's no judgment. Another one is to tell them verbally, explicitly that you care, right? There is a power in sharing those words out loud. I care about what's going on with you. They know you care because you're sitting there with them, but actually saying the words that you matter. Right? The reason why I want you to stay alive is that you matter to me. And I want to share with you that there is hope, even though you may not feel that way. So explicitly sharing, there's a great power to that. Another one is possibly encouraging them to see a mental health professional or sharing with them that it's okay to get counseling. And Jen will review this in more detail because somebody might already be considering it. And it's very validating to them if you actually mention it as well. Okay, and then the last one is letting them know that it's okay to feel this way. What I mean by that is, of course, it's not safe, it's not good to have suicidal feelings because suicidal feelings and thoughts will be at risk to suicidal behavior, and then maybe they would attempt to take their life, right? But it is not a sin to have those feelings, right? They're not a bad Christian or a bad person for feeling this way because they already feel bad for feeling that way, right? And sometimes that's why they keep it a secret. So when they feel life is not worth living, they already may feel weak and defective. So if we respond and emphasize, oh, that's a horrible thought. You shouldn't think that way. Look at your life. You have everything. Look, we're so blessed. What's there to be depressed about? Right? I'm being really, really extreme, right? But some people feel the comments that they hear are sounding that way to them, judgmentally. And it's not encouraging. When they can't even explain why they themselves feel hopeless, helpless, and worthless, hearing those kind of words can make them feel even worse, right? And when they feel so guilty, and to even feel this way, we should not be the ones to pour more fuel, to the fire during that crisis, right? So more on this and more tips that Jennifer will now do.
How would I know someone needs a referral to see a professional? Oops, back. That's not getting this arrow. So a couple things you want to look for. First is they don't have an ability to care for themselves. So this can be on a very practical level. They can't care for their basic needs. They're not able to get where they need to go. They aren't able to, they're not functioning sleep-wise. They're not able to eat adequately. So we're looking for some of the basics. Oh, I'm getting a little, don't forget to mention, so I'm gonna, excuse me, pause. If you have a question on anything up to this point that we've talked about, please take during this time some time to write down that question, because we'll have Q&A after we do a fun little role play exercise. But just no pressure. McKenna's going to grab them in a minute. So, but I have a feeling if it takes you longer than a minute and you raise it above your head, she'll probably still collect them from you. So, an ability to care for self. So we look at some of the basics. Are they able to sleep? Are they able to function? Are they able to make good decisions for themselves? Are they able to eat well? Sometimes when I'm talking with people who are depressed, it's like their ability to have good sleep hygiene, their ability to have to even have healthy, balanced meals, that lack of functioning actually continues to fuel the problem, right? So on very basic levels, if they cannot care for themselves, then we really need to consider, well, that might be a reason that we would refer. They're at risk to harm either themselves or another. So Dr. Ister just talked about this. Realize that sometimes there's what we call passive suicidal talk and active suicidal talk. Passive might just be I don't know if I could do this anymore. It's very subtle. But we don't want that to pass. If we're, again, observing all the nonverbals of other things going on with them, we want to ask a follow-up question on that. More active is clearly saying, you know what, I just don't want to live anymore. And variations in between on that continuum. Harm to self or harm to another person. If you have someone who's got acute rage and anger or really strong feelings and they have a plan or an intention to harm another person, then of course we want to intervene there as well. A lack of self-awareness. What do I mean by that? Sometimes when someone is in a really tough place, they don't even recognize they're not caring for their basic needs. Right? You're seeing them, earlier I kind of made mention of like you are seeing, gosh, their hair is greasy. Maybe they smell. Maybe they're starting to lose weight and you've noticed. These are all things that maybe they're like, I'm fine. But you're seeing how it's playing out in their life and you're like, I don't know that you are fine. So that would then merit having a more extensive discussion. Sometimes, again, it's that minimizing talk too. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And you're like, you have just gone through a major trauma. It's a big deal. So lack of self-awareness can show up in just their, not recognizing the magnitude of where they're at in their life at that moment. So another way that we know is someone needs a referral potentially is minimal progress when managing on their own. So this might be someone, if you're a support group leader, where it's like this person is really, they've been in this really low depressed place for a while, or they've been in this intense anxiety place for a while, or they're working on their marriage, but they're making no headway. right? And so it's like, it's wonderful. We want to be able to support them in the church as much as possible. That support doesn't go away if you refer them to other resources outside the church, but be mindful. It's like, it's painful to be stuck. When you're giving it your all and you're not making forward any sort of forward momentum, that's sometimes where you want to maybe invite another person to speak into what's happening. So those are some of the things that you might consider as a potential referral. How do I suggest additional professional or extended help in a non-offensive way, right? Because not everybody's excited for you to say, hey, you need a little more help. And the way in which you say that makes a huge difference. And of course, none of you in this room are going to say, wow, you know what, you need more help. You're going to obviously be caring and compassionate about it. Let's just talk a little bit about it. To begin with, as I've already emphasized, we are not going to suggest anything until we have thoroughly listened and shown that we care and we fully understand. You know, we can be super well-intentioned, but the way in which we share with people can make or break the situation. It can shut them down and they'll stop listening. So we have to be very caring around this. I'm kind of reminded of, I was thinking about this and thinking, you know, the famous love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, right? We all zip right to love is patient, love is kind, you know, and the first verses before that are, to me, really speak about this. It says, if I speak with tongues of men and of angels, if I have the wisdom and all the knowledge and all the prophecy, but I do not have love, I'm a clanging gong, I'm a resounding cymbal, I am not being helpful. And so we really, really, really have to make sure that if we're going to step in and suggest something that might be hard for that person to hear, that they feel cared about. Okay. Next, be clear regarding their specific circumstances and how the referral will be of benefit to them. So if you've listened really well, then you have a pretty good idea of, well, why am I making this recommendation? Why am I referring them? And so, you know, that's kind of a natural next step, right? Is if I've listened well, then I'm like, okay, I know. For example, maybe they've talked about having some extensive grief. And as I've asked more questions, I'm finding out they're very isolated. So I might then say, you know, based on what you're sharing, and because you do say that you feel kind of lonely and isolated, I'm wondering if it might be good for you to be in community. And I'm wondering if it might give you some comfort to be in a community of people who understand what it's like to have this type of loss. Are you open to that? You know, and then you might refer a grief share, you might refer to a widow support group or whatever the resources are. But you want to be clear about why are you sending them to this referral. If you just do a blanket, hey, I think you might benefit from some extra counseling, but you don't link it to what you heard, then there's less chance they're going to follow through on that recommendation. Okay, next. Normalize that getting additional care is a healthy thing. And I know, of course, we're all biased because we're the additional care providers, right? So we're like, this is healthy. But really being able to talk about, you know, if your child was hurting or like showed some indication that maybe they might have a fracture in their leg, you would get additional care. You know, it's just normalizing that it's like our emotional health, our spiritual health, our mental health are things that are just as important as our physiological health. And so normalizing that can be really helpful if you kind of tie it into like how we're all willing to get physical help, right? But maybe the others are a little bit harder. This also might be a place where you might share a little bit more specifically about maybe something, a struggle of your own, where maybe you went and got help and it was a benefit. Again, we're not going to flip things around and make it about us, but it can be a place where you can say, you know what, it was really hard for me, I think, to step into this support group in this season of my life, but I can't tell you how glad I was that I went there. Or you know what, I went to this 12-step group and I finally felt like that was the leverage I needed to move myself forward. So giving just a little bit of a share can be enough to help normalize as well. Next, minimize the obstacle of fear by helping them to understand what the process of getting help looks like. So, I mean, most people, if they've not sought out some sort of extra help, there's just a nervousness about it. For some people, it's a big area of fear. And so the more you can explain the process to them, the better it's going to be. And so part of, in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking about the resources of care that you guys have here at Mariners, as well as outside resources for care. And what I mean by explaining it is it's really helpful for you to know, okay, if I'm recommending this support group, what does it look like for this person? Are they going to send an email? Are they going to get an email back? Do they have to go through an interview to be in the group? You know, if I call for counseling, what's the fees going to be like? Or, you know, what kind of questions are they going to ask me? So the more that you can share, hey, this is what that group does, or this is what it looks like, or this is like if you give a call, they're probably going to ask these questions. So any way that you can help them to have an idea of, okay, if I do reach out and do this thing, this is what the process is going to look like. It's going to drastically increase the likelihood that they're going to actually follow through. Now, on some situations, especially people who are really struggling, they may not be able to take that step alone. And so in counseling worlds, we're pretty strong in our position of that we want the people who are seeking care to actually initiate that care themselves, because that does provide a sense of ownership. But sometimes people just can't. That step is just too hard or too scary for them. So why I say prayerfully, oops, sorry, I didn't change it. Prayerfully consider if you need to sit with them as they make a call to the referral source, as they make the email, send out the email, that it's like you're saying, let me come alongside you. I'm not carrying you, but I'm here with you. And if this is really scary, I'm going to sit with you while you make the call. You know, this can be a call as serious as like, hey, I got to call a family member because I've had some suicidal thoughts and I need someone to come sit with me, or someone to take me to the emergency room. Or it could be as simple as like, okay, I'm ready to do the support group, but I'm just not sure. And so it'd be great if, you know, we could make the call and leave my information together, or we could talk about it. So it can be a very big thing or a little thing, but either way, it is an important thing for a person who maybe you sense, and this is very Holy Spirit driven, like as you've had this conversation, you're going to get a sense of, is this person really have the ability to follow through on this, or is this something where maybe, Lord, you need for me to offer to at least help them to make that bridge to the next source of care? So, yeah. So with that, as I promised, you guys are so blessed as a church to have so many care resources. Your ministry may be represented up here, but because there's so many care resources, I think it's helpful to understand, at least in general, what they look like when someone reaches out. You know, what are they going to get in response, or what is the general response that happens? So if there's anything that here, and I believe this is on your print, do we have this on the printout as well? Yeah. Okay. I know you have your little, this in fact represents everything that's those QR codes that McKenna was talking about earlier. So, but these are all your support groups, all of your recovery groups, and there may be more, but this is what I was able to gather. If you're not familiar with them, it might be good to ask a couple questions of McKenna or Paul about these groups, or if someone in this room represents that group, talk to them, right? Because we want to be sharing resources. And then additional resources, you guys have benevolence. And benevolence, from what I'm understanding, and I want to be really careful about this, is that there's probably some form of financial resources for people that are in crisis. That's amazing. There's memorials. There's relational growth and enrichment for couples, which McKenna referred to earlier. That's on the website. That changes, I think, a little bit. So some things are offered at certain times and not at other times. And then, of course, your care team. And then finally, the professional Christian counselor referral list. One of the things I love that I believe is represented on your QR codes is also there's a thing talking about what do I look for in a professional counselor? Like, what are the questions I need to ask? What are the things that are reasonable for me to ask and know about that process? Move to Q&A first, and then if we have time, we'll come back and have you guys practice some of the role play.